Pause or rewind if you need to catch up or if you need to go back and hear an explanation again. Order of operations. Order of operations is what mathematicians, a set order that mathematicians put together so that everybody was on the same page, because they used to be getting all different numbers and answers, so they decided that they needed to put forth a set of rules so that everybody was getting the same thing. You may have heard the expression PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. All right, this is what you may have heard in the past. I'm not a huge fan of these particular explanations, and I'm going to show you why. So first, this is a hopscotch, and think of the hopscotch as the way that you would go about an order of operations problem. So I'm going to say parentheses, or this could also be grouping symbols, okay? So parentheses / grouping symbols, because it's not always going to be a parentheses. And we're going to look at what some grouping symbols might look like in a minute. Next is your exponents. And here's where this visual differs from the PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Next is multiplication and division, but the important thing that you need to remember is these go left to right, which means if division comes first, you calculate the division first. So multiplication and division, left to right. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and PEMDAS implies multiplication always comes first. It doesn't, all right? It depends on the order that they are given. Same thing goes for addition and subtraction. These are also left to right. Whoops, that should be add and subtract. Ooh. There we go. In class, you're going to be asked to make your own new visual for the order of operations. And we could have written this as the D here and the M here, or the S here and the A here. It doesn't matter because they go left to right, whichever one comes first. So I said that we were going to look at what some of the grouping symbols may look like. So what could you see for grouping symbols? Let's put them over here. So grouping symbols. They could look like parentheses, which we've already talked about. They could look like brackets. Absolute value bars are also considered grouping symbols. Also, a fraction bar is going to be a grouping symbol. You're going to do what's on the top of the fraction. You're going to do everything on the top. You're going to do everything on the bottom. And then lastly, you're going to simplify your fraction. Okay? And the other thing I want to say about grouping symbols is you're always going to work from the inside out. So let's say that I have multiple grouping symbols in the same problem. I'm going to start with the innermost grouping symbol, and I'm working from the inside out. Okay. And I'm also going to put an arrow right here for my multiplication, division, and addition, subtraction to again show left to right. Does your paper look like mine? Hopefully it does. If not, feel free to pause and get caught up with me. All right, next, let's take a look at a couple of order of operation problems. We're looking at them here out of context. So the majority of the work that we're going to do, you're going to have to figure out the order based on the problem. But here we're going to look at some stuff just out of context to give you an idea of following those order of operations. So look at this big long string of numbers I have going on here. Where am I going to start? Well, I'm going to go through. Do I have any parentheses? Yes, I have some parentheses. So I'm going to start there, and I'm going to say 10 minus 8. I personally like to underline the step that I'm doing, so if I need to go back because I made a mistake somewhere, I can find what I was doing based on what I underlined. Or you could also use a highlighter. That would work too. All right, so I'm going to rewrite everything. I'm going to simplify 10 minus 8. I know that's 2. So I'm now going to rewrite this times 14. If you have a number outside of parentheses, that means it's going to be multiplied by the number inside the parentheses. Okay? I rewrote my 2 inside the parentheses. I could also have put a multiplication dot in there as well. Up to you. So now, notice, I have division and multiplication in here. I'm not starting with 14 times 2. I'm starting with 9 divided by 3 because that is coming first, left to right. So I'm going to do 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now, again, rewriting my problem. I'm now going to do my 3 times 14, which gives me 42. I'm going through my multiplication and division, and I'm doing them left to right. Don't try and combine steps, all right? You're much more likely to miss something. Now I'm going to do my 42 times 2, and that gives me 84 minus 60. Now I'm finally at my addition and subtraction. And I get an answer of 24, positive 24 in this case. Okay? Next problem. Now here, inside my parentheses, I have 2 different operations going on. So do I go left to right, or do I start with my multiplication? Well, hopefully you're thinking that you want to start with multiplication. When you are starting in your innermost parentheses, order of operations still rules, okay? So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to make a little note here that we use order of operations within the grouping symbols. If necessary. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to solving this. So 7 times 2 gives me 14. So I'm going to say 7 plus 8 minus 14 to the 4th power. Now, still working inside my parentheses. I'm still on the P part of my order of operations. I'm going to do 8 minus 14, excuse me. And that gives me negative 6 to the 4th power. This exponent out here only applies to the stuff inside the parentheses. So now I'm going to do negative 6 to the 4th power. So, quick reminder about what exponents mean. This means I'm going to do negative 6 times negative 6 times negative 6 times negative 6. I'm multiplying the negative 6 4 times. So when I do that, because I have an even number of negative numbers and they're all being multiplied, that means I'm going to get a positive answer. So when I calculate that out, I'm going to get 1,296, which I am then going to add to my 7 to get 1,303. Okay? Next problem. Now this one's a little different. We have this negative that's just kind of hanging out. It's hanging out outside of the parentheses there. What does that mean? Well, this means that we're going to multiply by negative 1. So this negative here is multiplying by negative 1. All right, so I need to simplify what's inside my parentheses first. So that gives me 12. Now you're probably wondering, well, which comes next? The negative sign or the squared? Because this is like multiplying by negative 1, squared for our exponents are what's going to come next. So I'm going to calculate that, and that gives me 144, because that's 12 squared, divided by 4. And now this negative that's hanging out on the outside, it now applies to my 144. Okay? So now I have negative 144 divided by 4. Before I do the calculations, I'm going to determine the sign of my answer. I see that I have a negative divided by a positive. And I know that that means my answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to put my negative symbol down there before I do any calculations. So now I'm going to do some division in my head. 4 can't go into 1, but 4 goes into 14 3 times. I have 2 left over, so I'm going to put in my head, I'm going to put a little 2 next to this 4. 4 goes into 24 6 times, so I get negative 36 for that one. I forgot to box my answer in up here. We're going to do one more problem. This one you're going to have to copy down because it didn't get copied on the paper. You can either do this problem on the front or the back. It's up to you. This problem is going to say, so I'm just going to kind of draw some lines here to make some space. So this problem is going to be 5 plus negative 3 squared over top of 2 times 10 plus negative 3. We have a lot going on here. Remember when we were talking about grouping symbols up here, and I mentioned that we're going to simplify our numerator, simplify our denominator? That's what we're going to do now. So we're going to look at just the numerator, and we're going to do order of operations here. All right, so I'm going to start inside the parentheses. This gives me positive 2. 5 plus negative 3 gives me 2. So now I have 2 squared over 2 times 10 plus negative 3. So now I'm going to simplify 2 squared, and that gives me 4. So now I have 4 over 2 times 10 plus negative 3. Now I'm going to simplify the bottom, and that's going to give me 20. So now I have 4 over 20 plus negative 3. At this point, I have a couple of options as to how I want to proceed with my problem. I could take 4 over 20, I could change it to a decimal. We haven't talked about that, but you may know what it is. Maybe I want to simplify 4/20ths. So I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to simplify 4/20ths. So I know that to simplify 4/20ths, I'm going to divide each number by 4, and that's going to give me 1/5. So now I have 1/5, which is positive, plus negative 3, which is negative. So I know that this really kind of means subtraction. So I'm going to take 1/5 away from 3, and that means that I'm going to have 2 whole, and 4/5 are going to be left over. But because I have more negatives than positives, my answer is going to be negative. Okay. Questions? Write them down on the side. You have a question? Write it down. I'll be happy to answer it in class. Or write it on the back. Does your paper look like mine? If not, make sure that you get everything copied down. Hit rewind. Go back. Get your paper filled in. Need to listen to the explanation again? That's fine. Rewind it. Listen to it again. Do we have a test or a quiz coming up? That's a great time to re-listen to the explanation for order of operations. Thanks for listening.